Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Microsoft Project Pro for Office 365 and Overview. Today we'll be giving you kind of an overview of our desktop client, Project Professional. If you kind of consider yourself a project expert, it may be a little basic to you, but kind of want to get a feel for the room right before we start. If you've never used Project before in any form, could you clap your hands for us? You can be proud of it. It's OK. It's all good. And if you kind of consider yourself an acquaintance, maybe you've used it a couple times before, go ahead and clap your hands for that. Excellent. So there's a lot to learn for you guys today. If you're an expert, if you think maybe you know just as much as we do up here, go ahead and clap your hands. Gary, I'm looking at you.
Or more.
Or more. Yeah. So my name is Eli Sheldon. I'm a program manager on the Microsoft project team, part of the core product team. Been there for about 4 years and work mostly on the client, which we'll be showing you today.
And I'm Heather Heidi. I'm the program manager lead for the project client. I've been there almost 11 years. And we'll be demoing today, and then we'll take questions at the end, and we'll be available for feedback. We'll point you to our booth and stuff, because we definitely want to hear everything that you guys think after we're done and stuff.
We've got some sweet T-shirts for good questions that you'll love. So before we dive into demos, just want to talk a little bit about what project is, what project management means. So kind of starting with what is project management? One definition I found, project management is the application of processes, methods, knowledge, skills, and experience to achieve the project objectives. That's a pretty formal definition. Some nerds said that one. We like to think of project management as about people getting things done. Really, we try to be flexible enough to support the way that you want to run your projects. Obviously, the tool that we have is very powerful. Different people use different kind of subsets of it. But we're going to walk you through kind of a nice, happy path to get a project started and hopefully through execution. But project management kind of has a big spectrum. There are lots of components to it. Obviously, you have some really complicated projects. You have some really simple projects. So you may have seen this in some of our sessions so far. This is kind of the two axes we like to think of it of. Along the vertical axis, you see the team size, kind of how many people you have collaborating on the same work. And on the horizontal axis, the level of complexity, how much work it's going to take, maybe how long the project is, how complicated the relationships are between the work. And we like to break this down into 4 buckets. First, we have task management. This is the stuff maybe you flag an email in Outlook. You keep a task list in OneNote, stuff that you're really working on your own. Just kind of keeping track of your day-to-day, knowing what to work on when. Next, we have work management. This is maybe stuff when you have an ad hoc team at work. You're collaborating on a big presentation to your leads. You're trying to do a little feature of some sort. This is often managed in Excel with a kind of basic task list there. Also, SharePoint task list is a feature that we have. People like to use that really for just kind of lightweight task and work management. Project management itself is where we really start to recommend Project Pro and Project Online. This is where you really have a team that's going to last more than a few weeks, kind of a more rigid process. Maybe you have a specific deadline you need to hit, some relationship between the tasks, and you kind of have a larger team working on it. And the projects start to get a little bit more complicated. And then finally, portfolio management. This is the stuff I'm sure a lot of us don't really have to deal much with. It's really more for business people and executives, people who really need to figure out what work needs to happen next in order to achieve your business goals. And this is where you would really use Project Online or Project Server. And if you're interested in this, we'll talk about sessions afterwards, but we won't get too much into this space today. We're really going to focus on project management with Project here in this session. So today we have over 20 million users of Microsoft Project. That's both the client, online, server. There's a lot of big names you'll probably recognize up here. We are the leader in this space, so for project management software, more people use us than any other competitor. We're the leader in a lot of analyst reports. People tend to like what we do. And what's really nice about having this many users is that we can get a lot of good feedback. And so we build features for the industries that we work with. They tell us what they need. And it's this great cycle where every release we kind of help more and more people manage their projects the way that they want to manage them. So I'm going to talk just briefly about the different kind of industries we really see a lot of use in so you can get a sense of where and how you might use Microsoft Project. One really popular one for us is manufacturing and construction. You can imagine these projects can get really complicated if you're building a big skyscraper or trying to do a product launch. But basically, keeping track of all your resources and all the equipment that it would take to run a construction site would be a great use of Microsoft Project. keeping track of costs. Obviously, usually the two limiting factors on any big construction project would be the deadline you need to have your building or your bridge ready by, and the amount of money that you have to spend on it since you're working with lots of clients. And really having everyone that's working on the project come together to use one piece of software to really track your tasks. Retail, similarly, if you have lots of stores distributed all around the country or all around the world, it's great to have one standardized system to track if you have new stores opening, if you have kind of marketing campaigns you need to run, remodels, having really templates defined for that kind of thing, and making sure everyone is using the same system really helps kind of reduce the work at each individual location. Oil and gas, another big one. As you can imagine, very complicated projects, trying to set pipeline, trying to manage rig schedules, maintenance crews that need to go out. If you have a limited set of resources or people working on it, you got to send them in the right places at the right time. Project would be a great tool for that as well. Healthcare, we had St. Luke's present yesterday. It's obviously, if you want to do something like EHR, which is electronic health records, a lot of hospitals over the last decade or so have been rolling those out, which is a very, very big undertaking for a hospital to do, making sure you're not interrupting your doctors or really getting in the way and risking your patients' best experience. Some medical research, product development type stuff, you have to work with lots of governing bodies here in the States and around the world, making sure you hit those deadlines and can kind of keep track of what state different research and new innovations are in. And then the last one I'll talk about, IT. This is what a lot of people in the room are probably here for. You've heard probably lots of talks about this already over the course, and will continue to over the course of the week. But IT is really where this maybe is most important. If you have a company you're trying to run and you need to make sure you're not interrupting anyone's process, getting in anyone's way, you have usually a pretty small number of resources to be able to do these really big projects and just be able to innovate on your company's technology. It's great to be able to schedule all of your things and make sure you're not overlapping or overbooking anyone. And then I will jump mostly into the demo with that. We wanted to come up with a company that we could demo, kind of wear the hat of as we go through a demo to show you a real world experience. And so we came up with a kind of honey supporter, something based in the San Francisco Bay Area that's going to help honey makers really get ready. And we decided to call them Baby Delivery. Just my co-presenter maybe makes sense to you. So we're going to be wearing this hat for the rest of the demo. Our goal is to get a bunch of bees ready to ship over to Boston. And we need to know basically how long it's going to take, how soon we can deliver, and make sure we have the right people working on the right things at the right time. So with that, I will switch over to the demo. And again, this is kind of just a really basic overview of how you might get kind of this basic schedule into Microsoft Project, make a timeline, make a Gantt chart, really help you drive your project through to completion. So I'm starting here in Excel. We know this is probably our biggest competitor in the market. People like to manage their tasks in Excel. It's a spreadsheet. They can do what they want. It's really simple. Most people, most end users are pretty familiar with it. So what I have here is just a pretty simple list of the initial tasks I know we're going to need to run this project, and then how long I think each task is going to take. And since we're this kind of company that does this a lot, we pretty much know what it takes to kind of get this project off the ground. So to start this project, I am just going to copy and paste these tasks into Project. We could, of course, also save templates in Project and kind of do it all from Project, but I know since a lot of us probably are more familiar with Excel, a lot of users like to start here. So I will just copy these, and then I'll switch over to Project. This is the interface you would see when you launch. Obviously, lots of templates here. You can see quite quickly, many of these align with the industries I just talked about. What I have in the background is basically a blank project with the set of columns defined. So this is Project. If you've never seen it before, huzzah. It hopefully looks pretty similar. Yeah, Project, right? Looks pretty similar to most of the other Office applications. I am running the public preview that we launched earlier this week here, so it is very new code that many of you probably haven't had much of a chance to play around with. But hopefully, if you've used Project 2013 or even Project 2010, it seems pretty familiar to you. So I'm going to start by pasting in those tasks that I just copied in Excel. And you can see right away we get that nice spreadsheet view of those two columns, the task name and the duration. But Project has also taken those durations and come up with the start and finish date based on today's date, or based on the start date of the project, which I set to May 1st. And you also get the very beginnings of a Gantt chart on the right. Gantt chart, if you're not familiar with it, pretty old school way of looking at project schedule, and you'll see this kind of get more complicated as the project goes. But we have lots of users who pretty much just use Project to make these Gantt charts. They look pretty professional. They make it look like you know what you're doing. But they can also be really helpful in actually tracking visually where you are in the project and kind of issues you have and how all the tasks relate together. And then the ribbon, of course, you'll see this ribbon, different ribbon tabs. You have this in every Office application these days. We introduced this a couple releases ago, so most of the commands that I'll be using you can find right up here in the ribbon. And then right between the ribbon and the Gantt chart below, you can see a timeline. This is a feature we introduced not too long ago. It's probably one of most users' favorite features. Being able to build a timeline to present up to your team, present to executives, send out an email is a really powerful tool to see kind of your big milestones and phases visually. And we'll kind of build that out as the demo progresses. So first thing I'm going to do is create another task. I realize that for a project of this scale, we're going to need more than just one hive in order to get 100,000 bees ready for delivery. So I'm going to go down here and click on this new task icon, and that's going to make a task right above where my selection is, which is on package bees. And you can see we get a new task row. I can type in the name, which I'll do momentarily. It guesses that this is a one-day task, and I can set that duration, obviously, and it schedules it right along with the rest of the tasks. And we'll kind of build out a hierarchy as we go. So right now, everything's starting right at the same time. Obviously, that's not how the project's going to work, and so we'll kind of build that out going forward. So I'll call this hive 2, because I know we need a second hive. And I'm going to say this hive is going to take about 4 weeks. So I'll type 4W. And you can see that that is now the longest task. It kind of pushes the end of the project out. And so our current end of project date, if everything went perfectly on plan, would be May 28th. And you'll see that continue to get longer and longer as we add more tasks. I'm going to add a milestone task next. A milestone you can think of as a task without any real duration. It's kind of exactly what you'd think of when you think of as a milestone. It's something that represents some big completion of a part of the project. For us, I'd consider delivery pretty much our primary milestone on the project. So right next to that new task thing, I'll click on the new milestone button, and I'll say this is our delivery. And so this will kind of align with the end date of the project, and it's really the date that we're trying to hit, the date that we can report back to our customer when we're ready to commit to a specific delivery date. Next, I'm going to show some hierarchy stuff. And so if you kind of get a really big, complex project plan and you have all your tasks in this flat list, it's hard to tell how they relate to one another, how different phases are broken up. Most users like to have at least 1 or 2 levels of hierarchy, so you can kind of see which tasks belong to bigger buckets of work. So I'll make a parent task or a summary task for the first hive, because we need that first hive to basically initiate our first set of bees that we can then spin off into additional hives. So I'll come over here and click on the summary task button. And then you can see right away that it looks a little bit different on the right. It looks kind of like this rotated 90 degrees bracket thing. And that's saying that the task right below it, which is first colony forms, is the child task of that summary task. And so that lets us know that those 2 tasks are related, and that first colony forms task really rolls up to the summary task, which I will call hive 1. Another way to make summary tasks or to kind of set hierarchy is using these indent and outdent buttons that you see right here. And so I consider the new queens develop, that's happening in that same first hive. And so to keep track of that, I'll just go ahead and indent that task. And then just to show you what it looks like, I can actually indent that again, which creates 2 levels of hierarchy, represented the same visually on the right. We won't get that complicated in this project, but just kind of wanted to show how simple it is to move things in and out. Another great feature we have is copying and pasting tasks. And so I could go into Hive 2 and create both of those formation and queen developing tasks again. But I can also just copy and paste the tasks. So if I select them both, and I'm going to do Control-C to copy, come down here and paste them, you can see that those 2 tasks, with all the same info that they had above, are now underneath Hive 2. And obviously, I want to indent those the same. With most of our functions, you can select however many tasks you want to apply it to. And I'll just go ahead and click indent again. And since this is no longer the first hive, I'll just rename this one formation, because that's really when the hive starts to form, all the baby bees get working. Knowing that each hive usually gets us about 25,000 bees ready for delivery, I'm going to say we need a third and a fourth hive. So I'll kind of do exactly what I just did again. I'll copy everything from Hive 2, copy it with Control-C, and then paste it 2 more times. You'll notice that as I paste these, just because of the way the tasks above them were indented, they get kind of this hierarchy that we're not really looking for. So I will go ahead and outdent, which is, of course, the opposite of indent. And so at this point, we have 4 hives. All of them seem to be running at the same time so far, and we'll change that in just a bit. But we think that with these 4 hives, we will get the 100,000 bees that we need to deliver to Boston. But of course, these things can't all happen at the same time. As I mentioned, we need those first bees to seed the next 3 hives. We kind of need that first hive picked, as you can see with these first 2 tasks, before we can start forming it. So one of the really powerful things, and maybe the first reason you'd really need to use Project, is linking tasks. And linking tasks basically allows you to say, hey, task 2 can only start when task 1 finishes. There's some dependency there with the work, whether it's bees actually being ready to be transported, or one hive seeding another hive. It's that relationship that makes this really powerful. And you'll see kind of the power of that and how things get moved around once I start linking things. So I'll say that seed colony insertion, where we really take our first initial tiny set of bees and put it in our first hive, obviously has to happen after we pick that first hive. So I'll select these 2 tasks, and I will click this link icon right here. And you can see on the right that we actually draw a link arrow from the end of that first task to the start of the second one. And I can zoom in a bit, and you can see it a little better. Right at the start there. And you'll notice that over on the left, in a very light blue shading, Project's telling us that it's changed the start and finish dates of that first task. Since they are both 4-hour tasks, they can obviously fit in a normal 8-hour workday. So both of those tasks, you can see the actual time header on the right, follow each other in that first day of the project. So I'll go ahead and kind of set up the rest of the project with all the hierarchy I think that we'll need. So we'll say that the first colony forming obviously has to happen after we pick it. And instead of clicking the link icon every time, I can actually just type a number into this predecessor column. Columns for us basically have all of the data that you would need for your project. So you can see the set of columns along the top right now are a pretty basic set of columns, and I'll show you how to add some more later. But entering a value here would really be doing the same thing that clicking the link icon up here would do. So I'll say that this task 4, first colony forms, is dependent on task 2. And I'm getting that 2 right here from the left. So I'll just go ahead and type a 2 in here. And we'll see that that causes task 4 to move over a little bit, such that it happens both after task 2, the colony insertion, but also after the weekend. We're smart enough to know, and obviously you can change this with our calendar infrastructure, but we know that people generally aren't going to work on the weekends. So we move that from the end of Friday to the start of Monday, so people are actually in the office. And then I'll say that the queens have to start after the colony forms. Queens don't necessarily start forming right away. They kind of need enough baby bees to support them. So I'll go ahead and put a 4 in there to show that the 2 tasks within that first hive summary task are actually linked. And you'll notice, again, the dates move out, but also the summary task above it, this hive 1 summary task that we created, that bracket moves over to now encompass both of those tasks as they are linked. So we don't have to worry about the dates for that anymore. They're going to automatically roll up from the 2 tasks below them. So I'm just going to go ahead and enter some more values, and you can kind of keep an eye on how it happens. But I'll say that all the formations of the 2nd through 4th hives have to happen after the first one is done. Each queen has to happen after its own hive's formation is done. And I will kind of zoom out or scroll over on the Gantt chart so you can continue to see what's happening. Say that packaging obviously has to happen after all of the hives are ready. And so the way I'll show this is actually by using multiple predecessors for that task. So right in that predecessors field, I can type each task ID that I want separated by a comma, for instance. And that'll mean that every task that it has a predecessor for needs to be completed for that next task to start. It's a pretty common relationship among tasks where there are multiple tasks feeding the successor task. So I'll say that to be done, we need all of our hives to be ready. So that's generally marked by the queens being developed. So I'll say that's task 5, task 9, task 12, and task 15. And you'll see the errors we get now look a little more complicated. We have errors coming from each of the queen tasks feeding that. And then obviously I need the last 2 tasks. We'll transport them after they are packaged, and we will deliver them after they are transported. So this is the basic. Let me actually go to the View tab and say zoom to the entire project so we can see things very easily. This is pretty much the basic work-loaded schedule. It takes account into all the task dependencies. So our tentative date here would be July 10th, but we're not entirely sure that that's right yet because we haven't necessarily known when we're actually going to start the project. We haven't added any people to know who's available to work on it. And obviously, we don't know if everything's going to happen on schedule. So to just kind of demonstrate the value of linking everything, obviously, you saw that things moved out nicely as we went along. But still, you could maybe do that in Excel. It would take some work, some manual updating. But what's really powerful is that now if I move any of these predecessor tasks, everything else is going to move automatically. And I don't have to worry about updating the dates if anything slips. So if I say that we can't actually start last Friday, probably because it's in the past, but I want to start next Monday, I can click on the start date arrow, and that gives me a nice calendar control. And click on May 11th here. And you can see everything moves out. Everything there on the left shaded in blue is data that has changed. And so just with one click, I get to not worry about any manual updating. Everything, since Project knows how to schedule this, gets moved along nicely with that. And while we're here, I'll probably add a few tasks to the timeline. There's kind of a lot of bars to look at all of a sudden. But I just kind of want to get a sense of where each hive is falling. So I will select Hive 1 down here. I can actually edit from the task ribbon again and say add to timeline. And you'll see that that gets added as a bar up here in the timeline. All of the data is still shown there. Heather will kind of go into more about what you can do with the timeline later. Let's say I want to add all the hives, and I don't want to do them one at a time. In Project 2016, we've introduced this great new feature called Tell Me. This allows users who maybe aren't as familiar with the product to type in what they think they're looking for with some pretty basic natural language input and figure out where the commands are without having to dive through all our ribbons or maybe expose buttons that aren't there. So I can type, I'm going to say, I want to add a bunch of tasks to the timeline. So I just search timeline. I get a bunch of timeline-related results. I'll choose add existing tasks to timeline. And that lets me very quickly just pick all the tasks that I want to add and see on that timeline for the rest of the project. So the hives, and then probably delivery is the most important thing. So you can see the timeline expands. We get this kind of start of a nice timeline view. We can color things if we want. You can say maybe the second set of hives are going to be, I don't know, this orange color. You can move stuff around up here, pretty much work it however you want. And again, Heather will show a little bit more of that later. But this is kind of a nice start to the timeline. It lets us see where in time our big summary tasks. We could also think of them as phases are falling. So this is a pretty good start. We're up to July 20th for now, still well within our project window. But we haven't thought about resources. So I think it's about time to add some resources to the project. What we call resources, many people think of as people. They are just the people that will be doing the work in the project. We also have other types of resources, like if you have equipment that is maybe dependent on a fixed set of time, you could add those. But for now, I'll just talk about the people who will actually be doing this work. So to add resources, for this demo, I will add them manually. You could also sync to Outlook contacts, to AD, to a multitude of ways to kind of import people that you actually work with. But I'll just go ahead and create some. To get there, I'm going to go to the View tab on the ribbon and pick Resource Sheet. Except I had the timeline selected. So let me turn off details and do that again. So you can see we have no resources in the project. It's really easy to add them. All I have to do is type in their name. So for this project, I know I'm going to need a couple beekeepers, a couple packagers, and then someone to drive the delivery van. So I'll just type in, let's call him Beekeeper Bob, Beekeeper Betty, Packager Pete, Packager Paula, and Driver Dan. Very conveniently named people that I have working on this team. So if I wanted to track costs in this project, I could go ahead and enter their rates per hour. I could set overtime rates. I could figure out if they're not full-time employees. I could set that max unit thing a little lower to maybe 4 hours a day. But I'll kind of keep everything here. I'm not super worried with cost on this project. So I'm going to go back to that Gantt chart view. And I'm going to turn the timeline back on. So they haven't made it. I mean, they're in the project now, but obviously project doesn't know who I want working on what. But we have this resource name column, and I will show a little bit more of it here. I know I want Beekeeper Betty to really do most of the work on this project. So to assign her to this first task of seed colony selection, I'm just going to click in the resource name cell and check Beekeeper Betty. And you'll see that that makes her name show up both in that column and also in the Gantt chart on the right, so I can keep track visually of who's working on what. So I'll just go through, and I could keep assigning them this way. I could also select all of the tasks that I want Beekeeper Betty working on and use our Assign Resources dialog. You'll see that I'm only selecting the kind of what I consider real tasks, and I'm not selecting the summary tasks. In general, I'd say it's not really a best practice to assign people to summary tasks. If you have someone assigned to the summary task and then all the child tasks below it, it can get confusing about how much work they actually have to do. And so by just assigning them to the tasks that really represent real work, that'll work best for reporting later down the road. So I will select all of these beekeeper tasks. And then in the resource tab of the ribbon, use my Assign Resources dialog and assign Betty. And then I will pick my packagers for packaging and my driver for transportation. And I'll zoom out a bit here so you can see the full schedule again. Now you'll notice we have a over-allocation indicator on the left there, this little red man right here. That is saying that Beekeeper Betty is overworked. She's not actually going to be able to do all of the work that we have her assigned to. A really great way to visualize this is with our Team Planner view. This is something available only in Project Professional and not in Project Standard. But I'll switch over to Team Planner. And this is really just another great way to visualize what's happening visually. It's really good for showing allocations and letting me handle them manually. So if I scroll over to those tasks, I can see those 3 hives all lining up in the same point in time, all assigned to Beekeeper Betty. One way I could deal with this is by obviously assigning them to someone else, and I can do that just by dragging up those tasks. So that puts Beekeeper Bob on one of those hives, which helps reduce Betty's load, but doesn't really fix the problem. And I could keep pushing things out manually. But one of the most powerful features that I like in Project is called resource leveling. And this allows the kind of power of Project's scheduling engine to figure out the best way to move tasks around automatically so that we can not overload our resources and hopefully deliver on time. So I'll go over to the Resource tab, and I'm just going to click Level All. And you can see that that very quickly moves out one of those hives to a later point in time. And if I switch back to the Gantt chart, you'll see that's reflected here as well. And so Project knows that for Hive 4, keeping all those links in mind is kind of the first priority, but then looking at resource usage, it has pushed that out until the end of Hive 2 or Hive 3 so that Betty is not working on 2 things at the same time. So our current date, August 17th, obviously getting pushed out a little bit further. We could have also resolved that by adding more people to the team, more resources, but we still think August 17th is well within our deadline. A couple more things I want to do before I hand off to Heather. I'm going to set a baseline. This is a pretty advanced feature that some users do, some users will never do. But a baseline basically says, this is a snapshot of the project at a point in time, and that way when things change over the course of time, say if we jump a month in the future and dates have changed, we can really easily look back and see what the original dates were and kind of talk about and have conversations on why things changed. And so to do that, I just go up to the project ribbon, set baseline, and hit OK. And you won't see anything change. And I won't go into what the baseline data looks like, but it really is just a snapshot of everything that you see here, kind of kept in that same project plan that we can then create reports against later. The one other thing I want to show is custom fields. This is another one of our most powerful features. Custom fields really represent anything that you want to track at a task level or a resource level or a project level, but we don't give you out of the box. And so if you have some department code field or you have some kind of custom tag that you want to keep with a task or with a resource, you can create a custom field, and that'll show up here just as a custom column. So I can just come up here in this Add New Column and say, I want to track the sting risk. For our insurance purposes, we need to figure out how likely someone is to get stung in any of these tasks. And just by hitting enter, I have this new field that I can really type whatever I want into. For us, it's going to be low, medium, and high. And I just kind of have that from doing all these projects before. But I'll go ahead and just start typing some of those values in here. So I'll say, this is pretty low, this is pretty high. And again, I'll only do it on the actual tasks. I won't do it for the summary tasks. And you can see it's auto-completing much in the same way that Excel does if it sees a value above it that you've already typed in. I will say when we were starting to prepare this demo, we had, and we're figuring out this column, we had a low risk for transporting bees. We didn't think much could go wrong when you're just driving a well-packaged bees across the country. But about a couple weeks ago, we were watching the news and saw this story right near Seattle, where a truck overturned just north of Seattle and launched millions of bees all over the highway. There are some great videos of all the reporters that they sent just getting stung a lot, because what else would you expect? So for now, we're going to call that a high risk, high sting risk. And so that is pretty much the core of the project plan. I think with that, we would say we're ready to go. So I'm going to quickly just jump maybe a month or so into the future and show you what it's like to see what's on track and what's not on track. I can do that by updating the status date here. That's kind of saying, hey, project, let's status or pretend we're kind of at this date. So I'll set that maybe to something in June. And you can see that shows up right here on the project ribbon as well. So there's a few different ways to mark tasks complete. I can click on the task and back on the task ribbon here, say this task, yep, we did that, that was good. You can notice the check mark shows up here. I can also add a new column. The first one that you'll see in the list is % complete if we want to be a little more granular about it. I could type in 100% here as well. Another great way to do it, I haven't opened up this project in a while, but I know things are on track. I can come over back to the project tab and click on update project and say, yeah, everything was complete up to, let's say, last Wednesday. And that'll go ahead and mark the tasks as complete as they needed to be in that 100% complete up to that date that I gave it. So you can see some of these tasks are 100% complete, but something that was kind of going through that time, and you can see it a little bit by the darker blue bar here in the Gantt bar, is not completely ready to go, and you can see that rolling up to the summary task. So the set of those two tasks together, based on how long they're taking, is about 85% complete. So with that, I will hand it off to Heather to kind of show you what happens next in the project and kind of some of our other core functionality.
Thanks, Eli. Can everyone hear me? So if anyone's seen the movie Sharknado, which was a really horrible straight-to-TV movie about tornadoes picking up sharks over the ocean, dumping them, and killing people, the bee thing was called Bee-nado. And we actually had our bee idea before that happened, just for the record. Cool. So this is basically the same project that Eli had. We had a slight disconnect on our timeline coloring. I went with the green-orange pattern. He went with all orange, Basically, we're starting the same spot. And Eli did a great job showing you how to get your task in, how to build a realistic schedule. But now that we're kind of in flight, a very important job of the project manager is to try to figure out how things are going. And you want to always catch issues as soon as you can, because we all know the sooner you catch an issue, you can fix it, and then you have a much more likelihood of still hitting your project deliverable dates, where if it's later in the project, it's really hard to recover. So I'm going to show you some quick ways you can do some analysis to your project. So Eli talked about the Gantt chart. There's a lot of analysis you can just do right there. To make that a little bigger, if you come to your Gantt chart format tab, we have all these different settings you can turn on. And since Eli had saved a baseline, and say our project slipped a little since he saved it, I can come here, I can display that baseline, and I now get a gray bar down here, which is basically representing those baseline dates that I had saved. So the baseline start and the baseline finish. And I can see that my new queens developing on this task has slipped out some. And then I can come down here and see that, okay, it really didn't cause much of a slip to my overall project. The delivery took a little longer because, there was a big accident. Only a one-day delay, though, is pretty good for that kind of accident. And you can see that my project finish date has slipped out slightly, but, only 2 days, so we're still feeling pretty good. Another bar style we have is late task. So basically, Eli set a status date, and now it's looking at that status date and saying any task that is not complete enough up to that status date is late. And unfortunately, in this project, I only have one that's late. I can talk to beekeeper Betty and see, hey, are we going to be able to get to this soon? It looks like she started on new queens develop before she finished formation. Maybe something's going on there. I can have a conversation with her now about this task. You can also easily highlight your critical path. So your critical path is any task that if it slips, pushes out the project finish date. And when I click critical task, it turns all those tasks red, so I can easily highlight those. And I can know that these are the ones that I should be watching a little more closely, because if I don't want to slip my project finish date anymore, I need to watch those. Has anyone in here used Excel before? Okay, one or two. So one of my favorite features in Excel that I could not live without is how they have auto-filter feature on all their column headers for tables. We have the same auto-filter feature in Project, or very close to the same, and I can use that to filter on any column. So if I come to resource names, let's see, I just want to see Betty's task. I can unselect all of them, filter to Betty, and now I can see everything that Betty is working on. And one thing to notice with our auto filter and our big filters, sometimes people forget they apply them, switch to other views, come back, and you wonder where your tasks are. You can always come down to the status bar here in the lower left corner, and we'll tell you if you have a filter or auto filter applied. It has definitely saved people from panicking when they think they've lost their task. It's like, no, you haven't lost your task. You just forgot, 5 hours ago you filtered them out. So one nice thing we have over Excel is because Excel supports anything under the sun, their auto-filter is pretty generic. But we know what kind of fields we have, so we can be a little smarter on ours. Like we know start is a date field. So not only can you filter for specific dates, you can filter for things like this week, this month, etc., before the status date, after the status date. So I can come here, now I can see these are all the tasks that are supposed to be done in May, and since we actually zoomed a little forward to the future, I can see they're all done, so I'm happy. If I don't want to filter, but I kind of want to rearrange the view, we have a really powerful feature that I personally think is always underutilized called Group by, not Group B. Maybe we're taking the B theme too far. But basically, it lets you organize your tasks, and then you can also see roll-ups within them. So I can come here to start date again, and I can group on week. And now my tasks are still the exact same task I had, but they're rearranged by how their start dates are. So these are the tasks starting this week, next week, week after. This can be a really useful view if, you're project manager, you want to make sure, okay, what's going on next week? Let me zoom in and make sure everybody's ready to go, like the resources are ready, etc. Or I can group on custom fields still. So I can come over to Sting Risk. I can group on this, and then we even do roll-up. So I can see I'm 29% complete with my high Sting Risk task. I'm 31% complete with my low Sting Risk task. And actually, this one's really handy, so I want to save it for easy access. So I'm going to come over here to View. Go More Groups, and these are all the groups that we have out of box. So you can group on critical tasks, duration, complete versus incomplete, etc. But you can always create more. And as I said, Sting Risk is a very important field for me. So I'm going to copy this group that basically just says Group by Sting Risk and call it, Sting Risk. And now I have it available to me in all my views in case I want it for quick applying or save a view with it, etc. So I mentioned how you could filter down here. We also have global filters that you can pair up with autofilter, and they're all here. And we have a bunch, again, out of box, or you can create your own for your custom scenarios. So if you want to see, tasks that are greater than a week with a high Sting Risk, I could create a filter for that. I'm just going to filter to incomplete task. And now you notice I only see my incomplete task. Alternatively, I could have used a highlight filter, which means instead of removing the ones that don't meet the filter criteria, show the tasks that meet the filter criteria in a special way. And now you'll see they show up in bright yellow, kind of highlighter. So another good view to use for analysis is the team planner view that Eli showed you earlier. And we're zoomed into days, which is a little too close, so I'm going to use my time scale to zoom out to weeks. And now you can see, kind of over time, here are how all the tasks are happening. If you remember, I have that one late task assigned to Betty. It will also show up as late in the team planner. And I can move my task around like Eli showed, etc. One thing the team planner is also really good for is even if you're not really in the middle of a project, but you still have a group of people who is assigned like chunks of work, you can use it just to show how people are spending their time. So this is, say we're between projects, and we have people in just generic bug fixing, we have people doing training, we have people on call, we need some people to do documentation. Like, these aren't really tasks, but they're just how the team is spending their time. It's really easy to create this in Team Planner, and this is a very visual way for me to show management, like, here's how this group of 4 people are working. And I can still drag tasks around and make assignments there. This is actually, the project team uses Project to manage our project schedules. Eating our own dog food, we call it. But this is the view we actually show the most when we're in our monthly planning meetings, because it has the best visual representation, we think at least, of what people are going to be spending their time on for the next month. Sorry, to get to Team Planner, you just go to the View tab and you click Team Planner. And let me switch back to my bee delivery schedule. Another view that people really like, both for entering and for analysis, is the usage views. So if I switch to task usage, I can come to the View tab and click task usage. And now I see all of the tasks that are in my project, and then under each task, I see the resources who are assigned to that task. And on the right, I have time phase data. Basically, usage view means time phase data in our definition. And I can see how people are scheduled. It's a much finer granular. So if you need to set your task, like, by default, we're like 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours a day, because that's how their calendars are. But if the task is really 2 hours, 1 hour, 3 hour, 5 hours, whatever, this is the view you could come to set things like that. And I can customize what fields I show. So out of box, we just show work. I can add actual work here. I can zoom out to different levels of time. So now I'm at weeks, and you'll notice it rolls up. So for Hive 4 or Hive 1, I can see the first week I was spending 32 hours, then 40 hours, 40 hours, 40 hours, 8 hours. So I can see how that's checked out. I can come here and even make updates. So let's say she actually didn't finish everything in those first 2 weeks. She kind of spilled a little into the 24th. We had a little first colony formation issue. The bees weren't happy. I don't know. So she spilled a little over into here. I can easily just add that update here, and you'll see that everything adjusted and rolls up. So usage views, actually, one of the MVPs came by yesterday and was just going on and on with me about how much people like usage views. So I'm like, oh, I'm already showing them in the demo. So one thing Eli talked about is the timeline view. So we know people, especially project managers, tend to love the Gantt chart, but the Gantt chart gets very, very detailed. And typically it has too much information for you to send it out to a team of people who, unless they're directly working on it. So if you're working with customers or management, et cetera, they probably don't want the Gantt chart. They just want the high level, what's happening when, are you on track? And the timeline view is a really good view to help show that, because you can select whatever task you want and use that to highlight them. So one thing we added in 2016 is the ability to do even more timelines, because if one timeline's great, more timelines is better. So I'm going to create a new timeline view. And I'll just say it's type of timeline. You can create new views of any type, but I want a timeline. Now I have that here, and I'm just going to add all of my tasks to the timeline. And you're probably like, no, it's too many. It's not going to be able to handle it. I can see Gary thinking that right now. But with 2016, I said we have the ability to do more timeline bars now. So I'm going to select my timeline and come to the Format tab. So each view, to step back, has a Format tab with commands that are specific to that view. So remember, when I click on the Gantt chart, it shows me more things about how my Gantt bars look, what Gantt bars I want to display. When I click on the timeline, I get all my timeline contextual commands. And now I want more timeline bars. So I'll just maybe do one per Hive. So now I have all these timeline bars, and I can start putting my task on them. So we'll have everything around delivery here. Go down to the bottom. Whoops. go down to the bottom. This one will be, we'll do the bottom one for Hive 4. Oops, sorry, I should have brought a mouse because I'm not as used to my trackpad, but we kind of ran out of vertical real estate. We'll put Hive 3 here. Hive 2 will go here, and then we'll leave the Hive 1 and the initial stuff over there. So now you can kind of see, like, okay, we have Hive 1, we have 2, 3, 4, and I can kind of see how everything's coming out. I'm still not 100% happy with my timeline because everything's drawn from the project start to the project finish date. And I think we can do a little better. So I'm going to start updating my timeline to respect the phases I'm basically using it to represent. So if I click on the first bar, I'm going to say, okay, this is from the beginning of the project until the new queen develops in that first hive. So that's 6, 8, 15. For the second one, I want to go, let's see, 6, 9, 15. 2, 7, 22, 15. And I think you're getting the idea is now no longer do your timeline bars always have to be for the entire length of the project. You can edit them down to be whatever you want. This by far has been the biggest feedback we've had on the timeline. People used to just copy paste like a phase into a temporary project, make a timeline, paste it into PowerPoint or Word, whatever, get rid of that project. You can now have timelines just showing specific date ranges. And of course, I probably need to get it out of here because my boss, my customer, et cetera, is not going to open my project plan. They're going to want to see this in PowerPoint Outlook. So I'm going to come here and say copy timeline for presentation. I could do it for email. I could do it full size. All those basically mean is we're trying to get you a size that will work well in that format. I'm going to say for presentation. And now I'm going to switch over to my status report I'm building for my bee project, the weekly buzz. Nothing? Last night I thought that was funny. I used to have just weekly report, and then I was like, oh, the buzz. Never mind. Tough crowd. So now I can paste this in, and you see with a little formatting, I can make it look good. I have all my tasks. Each of these come as a different object in PowerPoint. So now, it's no longer connected to my project schedule. So if my project schedule slips, this is going to stay the same. But they're now individual objects that I can keep formatting, and I have the complete power of PowerPoint here. So, I can make them different colors. I can do shape effects. So this is a really big one, so I'm going to have it glow. Whatever you want to do, you can do it here. To show the true power of this, I'm going to come over to our boy bands timeline. So we have right now showing how New Kids on the Block, Backstreet Boys, and NSYNC, and then the mega band of Backstreet Boys and New Kids on the Block formed. It's a little cluttered, though. I really don't feel like you get how important the various boy bands were. So if I come over here, you can now see I've broken them out by band, so it's much easier to see over time how the boy bands kind of rise and fall in the US at least. For the record, I am not boy band obsessed at all. Our director had to demo this feature in front of all of Office, and we were trying to figure out what timeline would be the most entertaining. Promise it's not me. I had to look it all up on Wikipedia. Okay, so it's coming back to my project schedule. So I showed you how to use the views to kind of do analysis and report outs, but we also have reports built into projects. We added these last release. So in 2013, you now get a report tab, and you have a bunch of out-of-box reports to get you started. So we have some dashboard reports, we have some resource reports, costs, et cetera. And these are all completely customizable. Out-of-box, they're pretty generic because they're meant to just get you started, work on a generic project, and then you can come in and add your custom fields, your filters, whatever you want to them. And I'll kind of walk you through that. So I'm going to go to the project overview report. And you can see right now it's basically just showing me my project 34% complete. These are all my top-level tasks. You can see the percent complete on them. These are my late tasks, and these are my milestones that are coming due soon. And that's nice that it's showing me percent complete, but say I want to see remaining work. Well, I can easily do that. I can just uncheck percent complete. I can come down here, and this is my full fields list, like the same fields list I'll see in a task view. Every field is here that would make sense to put into a chart. If I expand work, you'll see that I have remaining work, and I can now see for each of my top-level tasks how much work is remaining. Say I wanted to see level 2 task, I could do that. I would just come here to outline level and select level 2. And you can see it kind of gets a little cluttered, but not too bad at that point. And this is all built on the same Office charting infrastructure that like Excel and PowerPoint and stuff uses. So I interact with it the same way other than like our kind of specialized field list since we're a project and we know what fields we have. So I can click the filter icon. I can uncheck a bunch of these because they're done and I don't want to see them, make my chart a little simpler. I can come here, I can add a chart title if I want, and stuff still to do, call it whatever I want. And then I can do the same customizations to tables. So if I select the table, you'll see I have the fields list again. And again, I can come in here and say which fields I want to see. So let's say I want to see sting risk, because if it's a late task, maybe the sting risk is an issue. So I come to other fields. Custom. And I can see here's my sting risk field, and I can see like, okay, it's a late task, but it's a low sting risk, so maybe I'm not quite as worried about that. Other things you can do, because basically you can almost think of a report as a single PowerPoint slide that you can edit with. I can add shapes. So if I want to highlight a specific task, I can just add a big arrow and say, this is the one we want to talk about. I can insert images. Put a picture of a bee. You can get creative with it, kind of customize it, and now each time I come in here, these customizations will be here, assuming I click the Save button. And the data is automatically updating as my project updates, so there's no like refresh button here. If I make a change in the Gantt chart, you will see it over here. But now I want to get this over into PowerPoint because, as we know, that's what I'm sending out to show the latest status. So I'm going to do copy report, switch back to the weekly buzz, click paste, and you'll notice all my items came over looking pretty much how they did before. The only change you'll notice is that the chart automatically picked up the formatting from my PowerPoint presentation. And again, this is separate pieces, so I can come in here and I don't want this description, I don't want this text, say, so I can keep making changes, I can edit it. If my project schedule changes, you won't see them here because the data is disconnected, but I can do things like format my chart still. So I think that's the one I like. Make it look a little better for my customer report. So switching back over, so I showed you how to take an existing report and kind of customize it to your needs, but you can also just create ones from scratch. So if I come report and say I'm going to just select one with a chart, and let me show that again because I went way too fast. If I click New Report, click Chart, and you can either do blank table or comparison, which just means 2 charts. Here you give it a name, say Buzz Report, Sting. So now, to get you started, we give you a chart that we already pre-select some data for you, but again, you can customize everything. So say I actually, instead of doing it by task level, I want to do it over time. So come here and say over time. That looks really bad because there's way too much data. I can come back to the time range, and I can edit it. And instead of saying days, let's say I want thirds of months. And now I have a much more readable chart. It's showing me actual work versus work. And remember I created that group earlier called Sting Risk, or Sting, I think. I can use that here because it's the same infrastructure pulling in the same groups, the same filters that we use throughout the rest of the project. And actually, I just care when the work is scheduled because I need this for insurance purposes. So I'm going to remove actual work. And I can now see for each part of the month what my sting risk is. And thirds of months is a little confusing because we just don't think in thirds of months, or I don't. So I'm actually going to go back here and change that to weeks. We'll do a little shorter date format. And now you can say, okay, each week, here is my sting risk. And you can see, okay, this is when I have the most low risk ones, medium, high, and again, I can filter. So if I just care about my high-risk work, whoops, I don't think I actually clicked the boxes. There. So I now have a report showing me just when is my highest sting risk work going. I can talk to the insurance agents and be like, hey, our rate should be a lot lower. Look, like we really only have a couple weeks where it's going to be bad. Again, I can keep customizing this so I can add a table. And maybe I have to also report on which resources are working on the high sting risk task. So right now it's showing me task. If I click resources, it's now going to show me all the resources in my project, which I could filter down. And then I can come here and show work. And again, I can group this on sting risk, or I could add the sting risk filter, et cetera. But you kind of see how you can easily customize everything to meet your needs. OK, so I've shown you how to report. I've shown you how to do some analysis to make sure your project's on track. And I showed you a little of how to get your data out of project. But let's go farther with that one, because how Eli was doing it is the project manager is hearing all the updates, and he's manually making all the changes. And with a little project, that's OK. But as your project grows, you probably don't want to be the person having to constantly be the data entry person. So one of the easiest ways to get your data out is just copy-paste. So I can just select it, copy, come over to PowerPoint or to Excel or whatever, paste it in, and now I get my data pasted as a table. I can continue to make edits over here if I want to. Notice that we do some hierarchy formatting, so you can still see, this is Hive 1, and these are the tasks indented under it. And of course, this isn't connected, so if you make changes here, again, you have to manually make them back in project. But this is a really fast way for me just to get my data out so I can email my team members so they all know the upcoming schedule. You can also export as PDF. So if people don't have project, but you want to give them the Gantt chart view, you can export it as a PDF, and they can just open it in PDF viewer. That looks like this. So I have my sheet on the first page for room's sake, and then I have my Gantt chart on the second page. You can also, of course, print it out. I can export to Excel. So Eli showed you how you could copy-paste from Excel into project. And you can, if you have a much more complex schedule than what Eli had in Excel, you can use our import wizard to map the columns to fields in project. I can go the other direction. So I can say save as Excel. Sure, although I think I already have one called that. And then you'll get this whole export wizard, which will basically walk you through either exporting the default fields or selecting your own. And then again, I can select the custom fields. I can say, like, this column in project, call it this column in Excel. And like any good chef, I will pull it out of the oven. And here's what you could get. And just, again, same data, format that all of your team members should be able to consume. Okay. So those were all ways where I could manually get it out and send it to people. But again, I'm still manually making the updates. I'm kind of lazy. I don't want to do that. So what are my options? If you have Project Professional and you have SharePoint, you can sync your task list up to a SharePoint site if using SharePoint task list, and then your team members will be able to come in and see the SharePoint task list. You'll be able to continue to work in the project plan, and as they make updates there, when you click Save, their updates are brought down, and my updates are sent up. So remember, I have a project that looks, whoops, we'll go back to our old timeline. That looks basically like this. I went to earlier to File, Save As, and there's a Sync to SharePoint command there. And when I do that, I get something that looks like this in SharePoint. So notice that my timeline basically looks the same. I have all the tasks. They're assigned to the same people, et cetera. So now Beekeeper Betty can come to this site, and this is just a team site that we add a task list to and a timeline to. She can come here. She can see what tasks she's supposed to be working on. She can mark them complete. She can make changes. When I open this project back in the project client, or when I click Save, I will get to see her latest changes. She will get to see my latest changes up in SharePoint. And then you get the full power of SharePoint too. So, we have a full project site here. So I have, a notebook where the team can keep track of their beekeeping notes. They can post their documents here. I could even be saving my weekly buzz up to the document library, etc. And then finally, the last option is working with Project Web App, so either through Project Online or Project Server on-premise. Of course, this is the option we like the best, and is also the most powerful. So I have this project plan, and right now it's a local file, and I want to get it up into Project Web App. So to do that, I just come to File, okay, I'm connected. Save it up to, so I have my Ignite demo tenant, so that's the tenant I'm connected to. I just click Save. I can use an import wizard, which would walk me through everything, but I know I set up this project correctly. So I'm just going to click Save, and baby. Now I'm getting this because Eli was really smart, and he knew that we were going to get a server down the road. So he used the same resource names as the names of our resources that we've created in Project Web App. So what it's saying is like, hey, you have a local beekeeper, Bob. Do you want to use Enterprise Beekeeper Bob for all of those tasks? So that way, Enterprise Beekeeper Bob sees all those tasks assigned to them is affecting his availability, and everyone can see that, Beekeeper Bob is busy. So I'm going to say yes to all. This one's just saying that, like, hey, you have calendars in yours. We have enterprise calendars. If there's a big discrepancy, it might cause a project change. I know they're the exact same, so I'm just going to say continue. And basically what this is doing is saving my project up to Project Online, Project Server. And to prove that I hadn't pre-done this. So this is right now, I'm logged in here as Beekeeper Betty. And these are 2 tasks that are assigned to her, but they're from the Community Beekeeper program, so they're not from my project. So my save completed. And now I want Beekeeper Betty to see her updates. I want Beekeeper Bob to see his, driver Dan, or whatever his name is. So I'm going to publish it. And that means that now everybody who has permissions is going to see my project. And you can create a project site for this too. So again, I can have a place for all my team members to come together, put documents, collaboration, etc. So once the publish completes, it's going to show up in Project Center. So now another advantage of saving everything to Project Web App is all my projects are in one place. We can build reports off of this view. We can build more advanced server reports. We're all using the same resources. You can see resource availability across all your projects. You get a whole bunch of features. There's a session, I'll point it out in a bit, at 1:30, after lunch today, where they're going to do an overview on Project Web App. So I'm giving you the 5-second, 60-mile-per-hour view. And it published successfully. So now if I come back here and refresh, you'll see that Beekeeper Betty has a few more tasks on her plate. So you now see my baby delivery project has shown up here, and she can now report status here, which I will be able to approve as the project manager, and will update my project plan. So I'm no longer manually having to say, Betty, how much time's left and stuff. And if I switch over to Project Center, do refresh, you now see, whoops, there it is. My baby delivery project has shown up here too. So proof that, nothing up the sleeves. One final demo that didn't really fit into our script well, but we wanted to make sure to call it out, is to show how you can easily extend project through Office add-ins. So if you're using 2013, that's when Office add-ins were introduced. And we have a bunch of apps out in the marketplace that various partners of ours have created. So Sensei, Kenneth's right there. They have some, although his aren't showing up. There they are. A couple other partners, and these do everything from help you do analysis about how well your project's doing. They help pull in details from the project site that you normally couldn't view in project, and a couple other things. But I'm going to do the task auditor one that basically just tells me, have I built a good schedule? And it defines what they consider a good schedule, and you can tweak the settings. So overall, you can see, yeah, we're doing pretty well. Oh, I have one error. Eli, I'm going to blame him. He created a summary task without a predecessor or successor. They have that as being something bad. I can configure it so it's not. But it just helps me build a good schedule. And then one thing we added for Office 2016 is you can now have apps that write back into project. Before it was read-only. So we have a sample app. And basically it just says, find me the milestones that have all the tasks up to them complete, because I should probably be marking these milestones complete, so that way I get rid of those annoying 99% completes on all my summary tasks. So I'm going to click to find the milestones, and then I'm going to click to complete the milestones. And notice, since we now have write-back support, all my milestones have changed to 100% complete. And that was written by Eli, so thank you, Eli. So that's basically it for our demos. We have about 8 minutes left, so I'll invite Eli back up on stage, and we have time for questions. To help with the recording, if you wouldn't mind going to the microphones, then we don't have to repeat everything, so it makes life easier. And we do have shirts to the first 5-ish people to ask questions. So I think you were first at a microphone.
Thank you. I wanted to ask if the PM updates the project and a user updates the project, will Sync to SharePoint merge the changes?
It will give you a conflict, and then you get to choose which version you want to keep. So you could either say keep the team member or keep the project managers. I just realized I forgot something important. Thanks, Eli. I have 2 more slides, so everyone at the microphones, hold tight. Are you on? So basically, you want project. I know you all do after these great demos. We have 3 versions. So we have Project Pro for Office 365, which is the subscription version, and that means you always get the latest version of Project. The monthly updates are automatically applied for you. Right now, that's on 2013. When 2016 comes out, whenever it does, you will have the option of upgrading here to that one. With Project Professional 2013, it's pretty much the exact same as what's on Project Pro for Office 365. That one is you buy it once and you have it, for the rest of your life. And then if you want to upgrade to 2016, you purchase that one. Project Standard is basically what we showed you today. The only features it doesn't have is the connections to SharePoint and to Project Web App. If you want that, you have to buy Professional. The Team Planner view and a couple other smaller features are also only in the Professional version. There's a bunch of documentation online if you're trying to figure out Standard versus Pro. They announced it in the keynote Monday. Public preview of 2016 is now available. Project is a part of the Office public preview. It's a separate install, but you install them from the same place, so just go there and click the Project button. We have additional project sessions. So the one that will give you more of a deep dive into Project Web App is that top one. So today at 1:30, very good session to go to if you're intrigued by what's going on with PWA. Today at 3:15, we have more about how to deploy if you're more on the IT side and you want to get into the more details of how do I roll it out to my company. Today at 5, if you like Eli, he'll be back talking more about programmability, and then we have a reporting one, some best practices, etc. And then we have a booth. Stop by and see us. We have stickers. We're basically to the left back corner-ish under the huge Office 365 signs. We're one of the orange booths in the office area. That's our website, Twitter handle, Facebook. So now we'll open up to questions. Sorry for jumping ahead. I should have put a note on my script saying slides. Oh, and you asked the question, so you can have a T-shirt if you want.
Woo. We tried to get a T-shirt cannon, but didn't quite succeed.
They were worried about insurance.
Yeah.
So we have 3 sizes.
Let's jump up to the front here.
Yeah, I was happy to see you demonstrate the export to Excel function, but I was kind of disappointed to see that it didn't come out with the hierarchy of tasks. I work with a lot of accountants, and they like to use Excel for project management. And so is there any improvement scheduled in the exporting of project plans with the hierarchy of tasks rather than a flat?
Nothing new for 2016. I mean, Excel doesn't really support hierarchy other than faking it with spaces. What does get exported is outline code outline
Level.
number level. So you can see which ones are your top level task, your second level task, etc. But not probably in the pretty format that you're hoping for.
Okay, thanks.
T-shirt if you want one.
Let's jump to the back over there.
Yes. So I've got certain tasks, this is a question regarding resources, where it's kind of like an either-or situation. I've got two people that can do the task. And right now, the way that we've got it set up, we're trying to find out if there's like a or function that you can kind of use for those resources, so that it kind of, yeah, so you can assign multiple resources. Is that even possible, or do you really have to set up like a group resource for that?
We don't really have an or function. I think generic resources would be one way to satisfy that, but then obviously you don't get to associate specific people with it. You could also assign both with 0 work, and then whichever one you end up going with, actually add the work value to it. But we don't really have the concept of an either or like you're asking for.
Yeah. Because I know that you can assign multiple resources, like 50% work type deal, but okay.
Sure. And yeah, Gary's mentioning if you're connected, you can use team resources, but that requires a server connection.
Yeah.
And you can establish the team for those to kind of associate with specific folks.
Okay.
Cool. Come grab a t-shirt if you want. We'll go to that back corner.
Hi. About 15 years ago, I stopped giving feedback to Microsoft on things I wanted in Microsoft Project because I never heard from anybody. Has that changed?
Well, 15 years ago was before we were there, so
Yeah.
clearly
I
the
was-
PM team has improved.
I was in middle
It's
school,
not-
so I wasn't getting that
It's
feedback.
not personal. It's never
Yeah,
happened
Eli
to you
wasn't born.
Yeah.
I hope it's gotten better. We are definitely open to taking feedback now, and we'll be at the booth a lot. So if you have more detailed feedback or questions and you want to go through, we'll be there too.
Yeah, we both personally look at the send a smile feedback if you ever click the smiley face
Yeah.
in
If you-
Project.
Smiley face, top right corner is in all the Office apps. We actually do look at those. Check the box that says you have make your email address available, because we get so many questions that I can't respond to because people don't make their email address available to me, and it is very upsetting that I can't come back. I must say, when I do contact people back, they're like, "Oh, there's a human there." I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "We read this."
Thank you.
So I hope it's a lot better.
Thanks. Jump over here.
I really like the reporting that you have on the project plans. The problem that we have is that a lot of our project managers get really creative. And what we'd like to do is develop a standard report for projects. So instead of going in there and just picking one of the generic ones, we'd like them to be able to pick one that we've already put the information we want to see for all of our projects. So can you define a standard report for all projects to do project status reporting?
You can. So are you a server customer or standalone?
Project Server Online.
So what you do if you're a Project Server customer is you would open your Enterprise Global, build the report in there, and then just how you can add custom views to your Enterprise Global, and they'll show up for all the project managers who connect to that server. Your reports work the same way, and they'll show up too.
If you come by the booth, we can demo that for
Yeah.
you, no problem.
Yeah, actually, I would really like to see that. So, and then we can also put like our logos and everything else on there.
Yeah, just how I added the picture of a bee,
Yeah.
you could add a picture of your logo. If you're a standalone customer out there who kind of has the same question, you can also put it in everyone's globals, which would be a little more of a manual push out to the desktop. But you can create one report, share it with all your project managers so you can customize your reports across everyone.